don't make this ugly.
You're really doing this today.
Don't be dramatic. The car's coming for you at 8. Vivian packed your things.
What Daniel didn't know, standing there so sure of himself, was that in 40 minutes he would be locked out on the lawn, in the rain, outside a house that had never, not for one single day, belonged to him. But let me take you back a little, so you understand exactly how sure a man can be about a thing that was never true. Daniel Hartwell was 34, and he wore the Hartwell name like weather that simply followed him around. The estate on Ridgeline Drive, the company his grandfather supposedly built, the Autumn Gala, where 200 important people drank champagne under a chandelier the size of a small car. To Daniel, all of it was just air. You don't thank air. You just breathe it and assume it will always be there. Claire was 29. Quiet in a way people mistook for weakness. She'd come from nowhere, the Hartwells recognized. And for 3 years, his mother, Vivian, had treated her like a stain that hadn't lifted yet.
Where does that girl even come from? Vivian used to say at dinner, as if Claire wasn't sitting right there. No family, no name. Daniel, you could have had anyone.
And Claire would just keep eating. Quiet. Watching. Always watching. Here is what none of them ever bothered to ask. Where did the money actually come from? Because 11 years ago, long before Claire arrived, the Hartwell company had almost collapsed. Daniel's grandfather made bad bets, and the firm was months from being sold for scrap when a private holding group quietly bought the controlling stake, paid off the debt, and let the family keep their name on the letterhead. The Hartwells were told it was a restructuring partner. They never read past the first page. In their world, reading past the first page was something other people did. That holding group had one managing owner, and 3 years ago, that owner walked into a charity dinner, met a smug young man who assumed she was somebody's assistant, and decided, out of a curiosity she could never quite explain, to see how far that assumption would go. Claire owned the company. She owned the estate. She owned the chandelier, the champagne, and the very lawn Daniel would soon be standing on in the rain. She had signed it all into a trust, under her real name, the name none of them ever thought to check. And she had spent 3 years being told to sit somewhere out of the way, in her own house. She stayed quiet because she wanted to know who these people really were, when they believed no one important was watching. That autumn, at the gala, she finally found out. Claire arrived late, in a dark green dress that no longer fit the way it had a month ago.
He did not let go of Sabrina's arm when his pregnant wife walked in. "You came," he said. "It wasn't a welcome. It was an inconvenience being noted."
Then Vivian appeared, a full glass of champagne in her hand, and a smile like a closing door. "You look tired, dear," she said. "You should sit somewhere out of the way." And then, turning too fast, she tipped the entire glass down the front of Claire's dress. "Oh," Vivian said, delighted. "Clumsy me."
The people nearby laughed, that small, careful laugh of people deciding whose side is safe. Cold champagne soaked through the green silk. Claire did not raise her voice. She did not move. And that stillness was the loudest thing in the room. Daniel watched it happen, and seeing his moment, in front of the men he wanted so badly to become, he walked over to say the thing he had been building toward for weeks.
"Actually, since everyone's here," Daniel said, raising his voice so the nearest tables went quiet, "let's stop pretending."
200 faces turned toward him. He was smiling, the way a man smiles when he thinks the whole room is already on his side.
"Claire and I are finished. The papers are signed. I didn't want a scene, but she insisted on showing up tonight, so..." He shrugged, and a few people gave him that permission-seeking laugh again. Then he pulled Sabrina half a step forward. "This is Sabrina. We're together now. I'd appreciate everyone being adults about it."
There is a certain silence that follows a man humiliating the mother of his unborn child in public. It isn't shock. In a room like that, it's arithmetic. 200 people, quietly deciding it costs them nothing to look away, and everything to speak up. Claire looked at him for a long moment. When she finally spoke, Her voice was so calm, it made the silence worse.
You want to do this here, she said, in front of all of them.
The car's out front, Daniel said, waving toward the door like he was dismissing a waiter. Take whatever fits in one bag and go. Vivian already packed your things.
And Vivian, unable to stop herself, stepped in with the line I think about more than any other. This was never your house, sweetheart, she said, patting Claire's arm. It was kind of us to let you play at it for a while.
Claire almost smiled. Almost. She set her ruined glass down on a passing tray, very gently, the way you set down something you are done with. For 1 second, nobody understood. Daniel actually laughed, that short bark men use to grab a room back.
Okay, he said. She's lost it. Somebody call her a... But he never finished, because the double doors at the far end of the ballroom opened.
4 people walked in, who did not belong to this world of champagne and small cruelties. Plain dark suits, no smiles. The man in front carried a leather folder, and every one of them walked straight past Daniel, past Vivian, and stopped in front of Claire, waiting the way people wait for instruction.
Ms. Reyes, the man said, using the name none of them had ever bothered to learn. We came the moment you called.
The word moved through the room like a cold draft. Reyes. A few of the older guests, the ones who actually read past the first page, went very pale.
Daniel's smile was still on his face, but it had stopped meaning anything. Who the hell are you people? He said.
The man opened the folder and spoke without looking up. We represent Reyes Holdings, the controlling owner of Hartwell Group and the registered owner of this property. He turned one page toward Daniel. Ms. Reyes has held both since before her marriage.
That's... Daniel's voice cracked. That's not possible. This is my family's company. This is my grandfather's.
Your grandfather's company was insolvent 11 years ago, the man said, still gentle, which somehow made it worse. Ms. Reyes's group purchased the debt and the controlling stake. Your family was permitted to remain out of courtesy.
Courtesy. Vivian made a sound like the air had been let out of her. Claire finally turned to look at her mother-in-law. Not angry, just done.
You told me to eat in the kitchen, Claire said softly. At my own table. For 3 years, and I let you, because I wanted to see how far you take it. She looked at Daniel now. Tonight, you took it all the way.
Daniel stepped toward her, and 2 of the suited men shifted just slightly, and he stopped.
Claire, baby, listen to me. The panic was climbing into his voice now. We can talk about this. Whatever's going on, we can fix it.
We already fixed it, Claire said. You signed this morning. Remember? You told me not to make it ugly.
Outside, thunder rolled, low and slow, and the first rain began to tick against the tall windows.
Claire turned to the man with a folder. Have security escort Mr. Hartwell and Ms. Voss off the property, she said. Tonight. And change the locks before I get home.
The rain came down harder now, sheeting against the tall windows, while 200 people stood frozen, watching the man who had owned the room 10 minutes ago become the man being walked out of it.
You can't do this, Daniel said, but his voice had lost its floor. Claire, I'm the father of that child. You can't just throw me out.
Claire rested her hand on her stomach, that habit she never noticed anymore, and looked at him for a long time.
An hour ago, you slid papers across the counter and told me not to make it ugly, she said. You had your fiancé waiting in the car. You didn't ask about the baby once, Daniel. Not once in 3 months. She shook her head slowly. You didn't lose your family tonight. You gave it away. I just filed the paperwork.
2 of the men in dark suits stepped to either side of him. Daniel looked around the ballroom, searching for a single face that would speak for him. The men whose boards he'd wanted to sit on studied their drinks. Sabrina Voss had already backed toward the door, her expression the careful, calculating look of a woman deciding this was never really her problem.
Sabrina, Daniel said, tell them I barely know him, Sabrina said to the room, and walked out into the rain, without a coat.
That is the thing about the people who circle a man for his name. The moment the name is gone, so are they. Vivian tried last. She crossed the floor with her chin up, the way she'd walked into this house for 40 years, and she reached for the old weapon.
You wouldn't dare put me out, she said. Do you know who I am?
Claire looked at her, and for the first time all night, there was something almost gentle in her face, almost sad.
I know exactly who you are, she said. I've known for 3 years. That's the problem. She nodded once to the man with the folder. Miss
Hartwell may collect her personal belongings in the morning, supervised. Tonight, everyone leaves. And they did. I watched Daniel Hartwell walk out under that chandelier the size of a small car, past the champagne and the frozen guests, out the tall front doors and onto the lawn, where the rain soaked through his expensive suit in under a minute. He stood there and pulled at the door handle of a house that had never, not for one single day, belonged to him. It didn't open. The locks were already being changed. There was one more thing. Weeks earlier, at a dinner where the whole table had laughed at Claire, one young woman had not laughed.
A junior events manager named Grace, hired to run the gala, who had quietly brought Claire a dry napkin the night Vivian first spilled a drink on her, and who had once said, when she thought no one important was listening, "That wasn't right. You didn't deserve that."
Grace didn't know who Claire was either. She was just decent when being decent cost her something. 3 months later, Grace was running operations for the entire Hartwell estate at 4 times her old salary. When she asked why, Claire only said,
You were kind to a nobody when you thought there was nothing in it for you. That's the only reference I've ever needed.
Claire's daughter was born that winter, in a quiet hospital room with no cameras and no crowd. She named her Elena, after her own mother, the woman who cleaned other people's houses, so Claire could have the education that eventually let her buy one. And here's the part I keep coming back to. Everyone at that gala thought power was the loud thing. The raised voice, the dismissal, the champagne poured on purpose. But real power sat in a green dress in the corner for 3 years, saying nothing, watching, letting cruel people show her exactly who they were. Because who you are, when you think a person can do nothing for you, when you're certain no one important is watching, that is who you actually are. There is no other version. There never was. Daniel spent his whole life sure the name would carry him. He never once thought to be a decent man underneath it. And in the end, the name was the only thing he had. And it was never really his. Tell me in the comments, if you'd been one of those 200 people, would you have stayed silent? Or would you have been the one to speak up? Be honest. And if quiet people, loud justice stories are your thing, like this video, subscribe and follow. A new one drops every